everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Gary Parker. Today we have episode 421 for March 24th, 2025. We have a new show for you today and lots of interesting topics to cover, as usual. And before we do, real quick, a couple things. As I said last week, and it has come to pass, I was featured on two other people's podcasts. I was a guest on other podcasts. The first one was the Data Diva podcast with Debbie Reynolds. That came out, I think, last Wednesday. And I was also on the Malwarebytes Lock and Code podcast, which I've been on 2 or 3 times before, I think, with David Reese. He's a great guy. We've gone back and forth doing each other's show. I'll bring him back at some point because he's a great guy and a lot of fun to talk to. On the Data Diva podcast, we kind of talked more generally about privacy and a little bit more about me and my background, which, I slip in little tidbits here and there on this show. But if you want a little more focused talk about that, you can get some of that from the talk I had with Debbie. They were both great interviews. You might want to check them out if you get a chance. I put links in the show notes. And I always enjoy, getting a chance to talk to a different audience. So if you get a chance, check those out, and maybe even share them on your socials. That would be nice. Okay, so we have plenty of news stories for you this week. We're going to start off talking about a vulnerability in the Apple Passwords, the new Passwords app that they released. What was it? I guess for this latest iOS, I think. That was really kind of surprising. I was kind of disappointed. But, these things happen and Apple fixed it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And it brings up some other interesting points. As I alluded to, I think last week, Amazon has decided to change its policies around the recordings in their Alexa products and what's done with those in a way that a lot of people were not happy with. But with all the focus on AI, I'm not terribly surprised. There was a lot of uproar about a Bluetooth bug in a very common, very prevalent Bluetooth chip. And it was initially called a backdoor. And then all of that had to be walked back because it really wasn't. And so we got a few things to learn from that story. Most of us hate Captchas, those little tests that try to make sure that we're not a bot and we're a human, which ironically a lot of bots could do better than humans. It's a real cat and mouse game there. But Google's been kind of the main company doing those for many, many years. And it turns out they had some ulterior motives along the way that I think are just fascinating. Got a couple stories actually from 404 Media this week. A really kind of disturbing tool that the U.S. government is using, but frankly anybody could use, to find people's social profiles online and do some across many, many different sites. It's really pretty creepy. Actually, I have a story from Malwarebytes this week, warning about online file converters. Something that I've used, but I've been kind of worried about, and this kind of confirms my suspicions. The last one from 404 Media today is kind of an update on Clearview AI and some of the things they've been trying to do to expand their database of images, which is very disturbing. And then finally, I always like to try to put in some good news, and that is that RCS messaging, Rich Communication Systems, which is kind of the next version of plain old SMS, Apple and Google have worked together, and they will be bringing end-to-end encryption to that standard, which is fantastic. So lots to talk about. Let's get to the news. All right, first up, this is a story from 9to5Mac, and it's about the Apple Passwords app and a particular vulnerability that left it possibly vulnerable to phishing attacks and other things, which is really kind of disappointing. But it's been fixed. But let's go over this, and then we'll talk about the various implications here. In iOS 18, Apple spun off its keychain password management tool, previously only tucked away in settings, into a standalone app called Passwords. It was the company's first move at making credential management more convenient for users. It's now been revealed that a serious HTTP bug left password users vulnerable to phishing attacks for nearly 3 months, from the initial release of iOS 18 until the patch in iOS 18.2. Security researchers at MISC, that's MYSK, first discovered the flaw after noticing that their iPhone app privacy report showed Passwords had contacted a staggering 130 different websites over insecure HTTP traffic. In other words, it's not HTTPS, it's just plain old HTTP. This prompted the duo to investigate further, finding that not only was the app fetching account logos and icons over HTTP, it also defaulted to opening password reset pages using the unencrypted protocol. And this is a quote from somebody at MISC, quote, "This left the user vulnerable. An attacker with privileged network access could intercept the HTTP request and redirect the user to a phishing website. We were surprised that Apple didn't enforce HTTPS by default for such a sensitive app. Additionally, Apple should provide an option for security-conscious users to disable downloading icons completely. I don't feel comfortable with my password manager constantly pinging each website I maintain a password for, even though the calls password sends don't contain any ID," unquote. And I'll come back to explain that here in a minute. Most modern websites nowadays allow unencrypted HTTP connections, but automatically redirect them to HTTPS using a 301 redirect. It's important to note that while the Passwords app before iOS 18.2 would make a request over HTTP, it would redirect to the secure HTTPS version. Under normal circumstances, this would be totally fine as the password changes occur on an encrypted page, ensuring that credentials are not sent in plain text. However, it becomes a problem when the attacker is connected to the same network as the user, like in Starbucks or an airport or hotel Wi-Fi, and intercepts the initial HTTP request before it redirects. From here, they could manipulate the traffic in a few ways. This includes modifying the request to redirect to a phishing site that resembles Microsoft's live.com page, for example. The attacker can then easily gather credentials from the victims and even launch other attacks. While this was quietly patched in December of last year, Apple only just disclosed it in the last 24 hours. The Passwords app now uses HTTPS by default for all connections, so ensure you're running at least 18.2 on your devices. I wouldn't be surprised if this news travels far under the radar. Share for awareness, which is what I'm doing here. Okay, so we've talked about this before, but whenever your device, app, web browser, whatever, interacts with the internet, this is often over HTTP. And in the old days, everything was HTTP, and then for, logging in and things, we would do this more expensive HTTPS secure connection. But now HTTPS connections are basically free, so everybody does it, which is great. And we've come up with these basic mechanisms to try to enforce that all the connections are done over HTTPS instead of HTTP, including this thing where you can talk to a website, say, "Hey, I want to talk to you in HTTP," and they say, no, go talk to us in HTTPS, and it sends you a special message back that forces you to go to the HTTPS version of the site. But as this article is talking about, if you are in a position to intercept that network traffic, you can redirect them anywhere you want at this point because it's not HTTPS. The secure part of HTTPS is not just that the contents of the communication are encrypted, but it also verifies that you're talking to who you think you're talking to and makes sure that the content that you're returned cannot be modified in any way. Now, the dumb thing that's going on here is that the Apple Password Manager, probably to make it look really cool and pretty or whatever, when you enter a password for Amazon.com or a password for your bank or wherever, Apple looks at that website and goes and tries to download an icon or a logo associated with that. So it could probably put a pretty picture next to that entry in your password manager to make it look more obvious of what it's for, like the Amazon logo, right? Well, the app was doing all these requests using HTTP and not HTTPS. So that does a few things. First of all, it may end up telling all those websites that you're using Apple Password Manager. It might be obvious that that is who's sending the request. But it's really kind of surprising that Apple didn't enforce HTTPS on the Passwords app. Again, the things that they were fetching in this case really weren't sensitive, but it sounds like it may have left open the possibility of some website intercepting your request maybe to log into a site, at which point that's bad. Because without HTTPS, the integrity of that communication is not ensured. So the bigger picture thing I want to take away from this is that HTTPS is really important. And a lot of people think, well, if I'm just going to, let's say Wikipedia, where I'm just reading a site, what do I care if that is HTTPS or HTTP? Well, because anyone along the path of that network communication could muck with your back and forth. They could, for example, insert some JavaScript into the returned web page that does malicious things like picks passwords out of forms or has all sorts of nasty tracking stuff going on. Without the S in HTTPS, there's no integrity in that communication. Anyone along the way can modify this. In fact, I think there were even documented cases back in the day where internet service providers, or, like I said, if you're some places where you would go to get on the internet with free Wi-Fi, if you were not using HTTPS, they would insert ads and other crap into your web page because they could. Okay, so anyway, this has been fixed. Make sure you've got the latest and greatest iOS. But I was really kind of disappointed that Apple did this in the first place. But nobody's perfect, and this research group, MISC, has done some great work, and they pointed it out to Apple, and Apple fixed it. So, we can only hope, since everyone does make mistakes, we just need to make sure that those mistakes get fixed in a timely manner. All right, next up, this is from Ars Technica, and this has been covered in a lot of different places, and it's about Amazon changing their policy on the storing of voice recordings in its Amazon Echo devices, with the rolling out of the new Amazon Alexa Plus, which features, of course, artificial intelligence. So here we go. Since Amazon announced plans for a generative AI version of Alexa, we were concerned about user privacy. With Alexa Plus rolling out to Amazon Echo devices in the coming weeks, we're getting a clearer view of the privacy concessions people will have to make to maximize uses of the AI voice assistant and avoid bricking functionality of already purchased devices. In an email sent to customers today, Amazon said that Echo users will no longer be able to set their devices to process Alexa requests locally, and therefore avoid sending voice recordings to Amazon's cloud. Amazon apparently sent the email to people with the feature "Do Not Send Voice Recordings" enabled, which is supported by the Echo 4th generation, the Echo Show 15, and the Echo Show 10. Starting on March 28th, which is like a week away, recordings of every command spoken to the Alexa living in Echo speakers and smart displays will automatically be sent to Amazon and processed in the cloud. Attempting to rationalize the change, Amazon's email said, quote, "As we continue to expand Alexa's capabilities with generative AI features that rely on the processing power of Amazon's secure cloud, we have decided to no longer support this feature," unquote. One of the most marketed features of Alexa Plus is its more advanced ability to recognize who is speaking to it, a feature known as Alexa Voice ID. To accommodate this feature, Amazon is eliminating a privacy-focused capability for all Echo users, even those who aren't interested in the subscription-based version of Alexa or want to use Alexa Plus but not its ability to recognize different voices. However, there are plenty of reasons people wouldn't want Amazon to receive recordings of what they say to their personal device. For one, the idea of a conglomerate being able to listen to personal requests made in your home is simply unnerving. Furthermore, Amazon has previously mismanaged Alexa voice recordings. In 2023, Amazon agreed to pay $25 million in civil penalties over the revelation that it stored recordings of children's interactions with Alexa forever. Adults also didn't feel properly informed of Amazon's inclination to keep Alexa recordings, unless prompted not to, until 2019, 5 years after the first Echo came out. If that's not enough to deter you from sharing your voice recordings with Amazon, note that the company allowed employees to listen to Alexa voice recordings. In 2019, Bloomberg reported that Amazon employees listened to as many as 1,000 audio samples during their 9-hour shifts. Amazon says it allows employees to listen to Alexa voice recordings to train its speech recognition and natural language understanding systems. And I want to come back to that at the end of this article. Other reasons people may be hesitant to trust Amazon with personal voice samples include the previous usage of Alexa voice recordings in criminal trials, and Amazon paying a settlement in 2023 in relation to allegations that it allowed, quote, "thousands of employees and contractors to watch video recordings of customers' private spaces," unquote, taken from Ring cameras per the Federal Trade Commission. Likely looking to get ahead of these concerns, Amazon said in its email today that by default, it will delete recordings of users' Alexa requests after processing. However, anyone with their Echo device set to "Don't Save Recordings" will see their already purchased device's Voice ID feature bricked. Voice ID enables Alexa to do things like share user-specific calendar events, reminders, music, and more. Previously, Amazon had said that, quote, "if you choose not to save any voice recordings, Voice ID may not work," unquote. As of March 28th, broken Voice ID is a guarantee for people who don't let Amazon store their voice recordings. Amazon's email says, "Alexa voice requests are always encrypted in transit to Amazon's secure cloud, which was designed with layers of security protections to keep customers' information safe. Customers can continue to choose from a robust set of controls by visiting the Alexa Privacy Dashboard online and navigating to More Alexa Privacy in the Alexa app. Amazon is forcing Echo users to make a couple of tough decisions. Grant Amazon access to recordings of everything you say to Alexa, or stop using an Echo. Let Amazon save voice recordings and have employees listen to them, or lose a feature set to become more advanced and central to the next generation of Alexa. However, Amazon is betting big that Alexa Plus can dig the voice assistant out of a financial pit. And that's a link to an article that was basically saying that Amazon has been losing tons of money on these devices. Amazon has publicly committed to keeping the free version of Alexa around, but Alexa Plus is viewed as Amazon's last hope of keeping Alexa alive and making it profitable. Anything Amazon can do to get people to pay for Alexa takes precedence over other Alexa user demands, including, it seems, privacy. Okay, so there's a lot of things to unpack here that I want to make sure we cover. First of all, this notion that Amazon employees were listening to recordings. Yes, that is true. And in fact, early on in the days of these smart speakers with digital assistants that were activated by voice, this was kind of a common practice. Apple did it too. I think Google did as well. And the way this was done is a certain small percentage of these recordings that were sent to the cloud, like when you said, hey, whoever, when you invoke the name of your assistant to get it to wake up, you say the wake word or the wake phrase, and then you say your request. And that request is recorded, and that little bit of audio is sent up to the cloud for analysis, because back then there was not enough processing power on the device itself to do that processing. So it was sent to the cloud for processing. They would convert what you said to text, then process that text and send back a response. And so some small percentage of these things were saved off the recording of your voice and what the cloud service thought you said. And this pairing was given to a bunch of humans to say, okay, did it get it right? And it was used to improve things, right? That makes sense as a quality control thing. The problem is that they didn't tell users that this was happening. A lot of them made a lot of claims about privacy. And honestly, these clips were probably anonymous. But, there's a chance that, let's say, somebody works at Amazon and they would recognize your voice, or Apple or Google or wherever this was done. And so they got in a lot of trouble over this. And for example, when this came out that Apple was doing the same kind of thing, Apple made it an opt-in thing. It asks you, do you want to help us make this better? And if you say yes, then this continues to happen. And in an anonymous way, these little snippets are sent up to the cloud, analyzed, and they hopefully improve their product. But basically what it sounds like is going on here with Amazon is where they were trying to do some of this processing locally on the device. There was only a few of their devices, probably their higher end devices, that even had this capability. And that's going away now. Everything has to go back to the cloud again. Now, they're saying that they immediately delete the recordings after the processing is done. And that's the way it should be. It won't be much longer, I don't think, before the devices that we have at home are once again capable of doing a lot of this processing locally. We don't have to worry about this cloud stuff. On the other hand, there's always going to be more powerful things that we want to do with these AI assistants that are probably still going to require something to happen up in the cloud. So we need to figure out a way to do these sorts of things in a private way that's with high security, where the data is not kept at all. I think Apple has a really good plan for this with its private cloud compute. And, who knows? Maybe Amazon will come up with something similar. Now, something else I want to make sure I call out here. The article makes this fuzzy, and a lot of the articles that talk about this particular feature and specifically, like, these voice assistants, they don't make it clear, and this article is fuzzy about it too, but these devices are not recording everything you say and sending everything up to the cloud unless there's a bug. The way it's supposed to work and the way they currently work now, and I don't think this is changing with Alexa Plus, but I could be wrong, they only send something to the cloud after you say the specific wake word, the specific hey you phrase that gets it to wake up and listen to you, and then take the next thing you say as a query or a request or a command or whatever. And then it's that snippet that follows the wake word that gets sent to the cloud, not everything you're saying. Now, of course, these things have built-in microphones and they're connected to the internet. They could actually just record everything and send it to the cloud. But my understanding is that is not currently how any of them work. Now, of course, if they were somehow compromised with malware, then, all bets are off. Honestly, what I'd like to see, I would like to have the cloud be my computer, because as we love to say, the cloud just means someone else's computer. Well, I want that other computer to be my computer. I would love to have some sort of a hub, a smart hub that's in my home that I can control, that is more powerful to handle these things. And then all my requests go to my hub where all the data stays local. And you could actually set this up so that you could access this from outside of your house as well. I would certainly pay good money to have that cloud compute be in my house. And then if, assuming I trust the maker of that device, I wouldn't feel so bad about telling it more personal things as long as I knew that I had full control over that. Anyway, the thing that really bothers me about this article when it comes down to it is that they're taking away functionality from people. They're forcing them to agree to new terms of service, which removes functionality that they used to have, and forcing them to do things their way. I think that's wrong. So I, long time ago, had some of the earliest Echo devices. But as soon as Apple came out with HomePod, I just replaced them all because I just trust Apple more. It's really hard to know who to trust, though, anymore. I mean, Google Nest has voice assistants as well, and they supposedly have security and privacy features built into them. But at the end of the day, I just kind of follow the money. And Apple is not incentivized to store your information and try to build profiles on you with that information, whereas the other companies are basically needing to make money off of that information. So the incentives are wrong for them. So I tend to trust Apple more. Maybe I'm naive, I don't know. But if you really want that kind of a voice assistant functionality, I would recommend going with Apple over Google or Amazon. All right, this next one is from a site called Dark Mentor, which I don't read very often, but it had a decent write-up on this. It actually got kind of technical. I try to weed out some of the more technical parts, but just hang with me and then we'll get to the moral of the story. This was something that probably didn't hit the mainstream news, but a lot of the security websites that I watched, this kind of blew up all over the place because the initial article about this really didn't explain properly what was going on and made it sound like it was a much bigger deal. Over the course of just a couple days, actually, that kind of got straightened out, and even I got sucked in on the first articles because it was from a site that I kind of trusted. And the way it was written up that first time before it was revised made it sound like it could have been really bad. And because this particular chip that they're talking about here, this ESP32 chip, is used all over the place. Like I think this article talks about it, like over 1 billion devices worldwide use this chip. And if this really had been a vulnerability in that chip that could be remotely exploited, that would be a really bad thing. And that is what was implied by the first article about this. Turns out, not so much. So it's a case study on how not to report on a vulnerability. All right, so here's what it says. This post refutes the claim that researchers found a quote-unquote backdoor in the ESP32 Bluetooth chips. What the researchers highlight, vendor-specific HCI commands to read and write controller memory, is a common design pattern found in other Bluetooth chips from other vendors as well, such as Broadcom, Cypress, and Texas Instruments. Vendor-specific commands in Bluetooth effectively constitute a private API, or application programming interface, and a company's choice to not publicly document their private API does not constitute a backdoor. The Cambridge Dictionary defines backdoor as, quote, relating to something that is done secretly or in a way that is not direct or honest, unquote. Wikipedia defines a backdoor in the context of computing as a, quote, typically covert method of bypassing normal authentication or encryption in a computer, unquote. The use of words secretly and covertly here is of particular importance because this secrecy is understood to be in service of intentional malice. A company that inserts a backdoor deliberately is acting in a malicious manner and could subsequently be held legally liable. On March 6, 2025, TarLogic posted a press release titled TarLogic detects a backdoor in the mass-market ESP32 chip that could infect millions of IoT devices. This subsequently was picked up by Bleeping Computer, which was widely visible on Slashdot, Google News, etc. The TarLogic press release is based on work presented at RootedCon on March 6, 2025. which is a hacker conference. Bluetooth has an architectural layer known as the Host Controller Interface, or HCI. In architectures like laptops or phones, the main CPU and the OS is the host, and the Bluetooth chip is the controller. Therefore, HCI is the interface between the host and the controller. If the host wishes to scan for available nearby Bluetooth devices or connect to one of them, it sends a command over HCI to the controller to inform it of the action the host would like performed. The Bluetooth core specifications lays out many HCI commands. However, it also reserves a command space for vendor-specific commands, or VSCs. These are commands that the silicon maker of the controller can use to manage the controller. This can include things such as how to update the firmware on the controller, how to get back nice-to-have information that may not be available via spec-defined commands, like, for example, the chip temperature, how to perform chip-specific actions, like setting the transmit power or a custom Bluetooth address, etc. VSCs are typically interfaced with via a silicon maker's proprietary software, like firmware. The main point here is that multiple vendors utilize VSCs for reading and writing RAM within the controller. This is a common design paradigm in Bluetooth chips. It's not some Expressive-specific backdoor approach, and Expressive is the maker of the ESP32. And the use of read RAM, write RAM capabilities for the benefit of attackers is already well known in the Bluetooth space. So what's the conclusion about whether the discovered VSCs constitute a backdoor? They do not. Expressive partially documented their VSCs the same as other Bluetooth chip makers, and include a capability to read and write the memory of the chip the same as other Bluetooth chip manufacturers. We are left to conclude that the TarLogic press release is spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, to gain attention, and the Bleeping Computer article and its repost to platforms like Slashdot exacerbate the FUD by focusing on the fact that Expressive is a Chinese vendor. What is our conclusion about whether the feature constitutes a security vulnerability? It depends. Specifically, it depends on a particular customer's threat model. Most customers will not attempt to make a distinction between the privileges of the host and the controller, and for those customers, it will not constitute a vulnerability. However, it is valid for a customer to not want compromised user space on the host to automatically guarantee compromised Bluetooth controller firmware. This was my threat model when I worked at Apple, and I worked to get Broadcom's VSCs for controller memory read-write disabled, because I had also helped design secure boot for Apple's Broadcom chips. So then there's an update at the end of this article, updated on March 9th, that says the TarLogic press release was updated to replace the word backdoor with hidden feature, which is more factual and what the original research indicated. After the community raised concerns with the characterization as a backdoor, and before TarLogic changed their press release, Bleeping Computer also updated their article to indicate that these are undocumented commands and not a backdoor. Okay, so all that to say, we really need to get better about our use of this term backdoor. It's a very loaded term. It implies something secretly done with malice aforethought. That is not what is going on here. Furthermore, the article originally seemed to indicate that these undocumented commands could potentially be accessed remotely via the wireless Bluetooth connection. That turns out to not be true. You would have to be running special custom firmware on the device. And as any security researcher will tell you, once you get to the point where you can control the software running on the device, you can do anything you want. So at that point, you're already screwed. And it does turn out that, yes, manufacturers do this kind of thing all the time. They've got private special commands that they can give to their software, usually for debugging or for manufacturing. Or as this article says, it's kind of outside the scope of the Bluetooth spec. And yet it's something that you might need to do to interface with these chips to kind of configure and control them. I read Bleeping Computer all the time, looking for news stories that I can bring to you guys. And actually, way back in 2017, one of my very first interviews was with Lawrence Abrams from Bleeping Computer. So I've seen this happen a lot. We've all got to be careful, myself included, for when these things pop up, these stories that, with clickbaity titles and hyperbolic claims like backdoors in hugely popular Bluetooth chips. And if someone reads the first version of these articles but never gets the updates, then they're left with the impression that this is a real problem, and it's not. So anyway, I kind of look at this as part of my job, is to bring these things to you so that I can help correct the record when things like this, kind of get blown out of proportion. All right, this next one is from Tech Radar. And I think it's really just fascinating. So it says, congratulations are in order. You, yes, you, dear reader, have been part of something incredible. Thanks to your hard work, millions of books containing pretty much the sum total of human knowledge have been successfully digitized, saving their texts for future generations. All because of you. No, seriously. You know how occasionally you'll be prompted with a Captcha when filling out a form on the internet to prove that you're fully human? Behind the scenes of one of the most popular CAPTCHA systems, Google's reCAPTCHA, your humanoid clicks have been helping figure out things that traditional computing just can't manage. And in the process, you've been helping to train Google's AI to be even smarter. And you thought you were merely logging into some website or other. reCAPTCHA started out as a collaboration by a number of computer scientists at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, first released in 2007, and it was quickly snaffled up by Google in 2009. The premise was as described above, by marrying up users who need to prove that they are human to data that needs transcribing, both sides are getting something out of it. So instead of digitizing books by having one person carrying out the very boring task of typing or checking the whole book manually, instead millions of people can unknowingly collaborate to achieve the same goal. Remember how it always used to be 2 words you had to enter? Conceivably, one of them was the real test, and the other was a new word that was yet to be transcribed. But as the user, you wouldn't know which was which, so you'd have to attempt to do both accurately. reCAPTCHA can even check its own work. By showing the same word to multiple users, it can automatically verify that a word has been transcribed correctly by comparing multiple attempts for multiple users around the world. Amazingly, thanks to reCAPTCHA boxes appearing on thousands of major websites and receiving tens of millions of completions a day, by 2011, reCAPTCHA had finished digitizing the entire Google Books archive, as well as 13 million articles from New York Times back catalog dating back to 1851. So what did Google do next with no books left to digitize? In what was perhaps a happy coincidence, this coincided with the growth of artificial intelligence and machine learning. In 2012, Google started including not just words, but snippets of photos from Google Street View, making users transcribe door numbers and other signage. And in 2014, the system became all about training AI. Essentially, the way machine learning works is that you hand the machine a bunch of data that is essentially already sorted. Say a bunch of images of cats that you have tagged as cats, and then it uses this information to build a neural network that enables it to pick cats out of other images. The more pictures of cats that you feed it, the more accurate the AI becomes at picking out cats from other images. Google has countless reasons to want to train AI to recognize objects in images, better Google image search results, more accurate Google Maps results, and enabling you to search your Google Photos library for all the photos you have taken of a specific object or place. Oh, and the small matter of making sure that your driverless car doesn't hit anything. You know when reCAPTCHA asks you to identify street signs? Essentially, you're playing a very small role in piloting a driverless car somewhere at some point in the future. So it is hugely convenient then that Google has at its disposal hundreds of millions of internet users to work for it. By using reCAPTCHA to tackle these problems, Google can use our need to prove we're human to force us to use our very human intuitions to build its database. This is why currently, instead of simply throwing up some text, reCAPTCHA is giving users more image-related tasks. Click on all images of cats. Click on all the boxes on the grid overlaying an image that contains a cat, and so on, for thousands of different objects. This is a particularly useful asset for Google as it competes with other internet giants to grow its machine learning datasets and algorithms. The more data it can analyze, the better the results will be, giving its current and future products a competitive advantage. And then the article goes on a bit about how AI is being actually used to defeat CAPTCHAs and the irony of all of that. Okay, so I thought this was interesting, and it doesn't surprise me at all because this is not the first time Google has done this. It's a brilliant thing for Google to do, let's face it. So does anybody remember Google 411? And this, you'd have to be of a certain age because back in the day, before we had smartphones to just look up any directory number we wanted using the internet on our phones, we had to have some sort of like an operator. We had to be able to call 411 to get information on something. Usually in particular a phone number, sometimes an address. And that used to be a service that the phone companies would charge us for, either originally our AT&T Ma Bell, companies, or eventually our cell phone providers. If you dialed 411, there was a charge associated with that. Well, Google came out with Goog 411 that was completely and utterly free. And I remember using that a lot when I needed a 411 service, because it was free. Well, the reason Google offered that for free is that they were using your voice to train their voice recognition systems. So basically they gave away this free service that required you to call in and to an automated service, tell them what phone number you wanted, and then it would use your voice to help train its voice recognition systems. And when it got to the point when it had all the voice recordings it needed and didn't need that anymore, it turned off the Google 411 service. Of course, that was also kind of around the time when smartphones became a thing too, so it wasn't quite so needed either. But this is not the first time Google has done this. And if you want to look up another interesting bit of crowdsourced history, go to Wikipedia and look up Amazon Mechanical Turk, and that's spelled Turk. I'll just leave that right there for the concerned listener. All right, next up, we have another article here from 404 Media, and it's about how ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement here in the United States, has been working with a surveillance contractor to pull data in from over 200 different websites about people, and it's pretty disturbing. So let me just get into it. It's a little lengthy. A contractor for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and many other U.S. government agencies has developed a tool that lets analysts more easily pull a target individual's publicly available data from a wide array of sites, social networks, apps, and services across the web at once, including Blue Sky, OnlyFans, and various meta platforms, according to a leaked list of sites obtained by 404 Media. In all, the list names more than 200 sites that the contractor, called Shadow Dragon, pulls data from and makes available to its government clients, allowing them to map out a person's activity, movements, and relationships. This comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is reportedly launching an AI-fueled catch and revoke effort to scan the social media accounts of tens of thousands of student visa holders' social media accounts, looking for what Axios reported as foreign nationals who appear to support Hamas or other designated terror groups. There's no indication Shadow Dragon specifically, or its data tool SocialNet, is part of that program, but Shadow Dragon says in its marketing materials that its tools can be used to monitor protests and claims it found protests around Union Station in Washington, D.C. during a 2023 visit by Benjamin Netanyahu. Daniel Clemens, Shadow Dragon CEO, previously said on a podcast that protesters should not, quote, be surprised when people are going to investigate you because you made their life difficult, unquote. Multiple tech companies and websites whose public data Shadow Dragon pulls tells 404 Media the contractor may be violating their terms of use around scraping. And this is a quote from Jeremy Scott, who I believe I've interviewed from the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC, and their surveillance oversight project. So Jeremy says, quote, the long list of sites and services that Shadow Dragon's SocialNet tool accesses is a reminder of just how much data is accessible and collected from and about us to provide surveillance services to the government and others. SocialNet is just one example of the unchecked surveillance ecosystem that lacks any meaningful transparency, oversight, or accountability that allows the government to circumvent constitutional and statutory protections to access sensitive personal data, unquote. Marketing material available online says SocialNet can plot identities and find connections between them, create a map of suspicious activity, and follow a suspect's trail, and, quote, follow the breadcrumbs of your target's digital life and find hidden correlations in your research, unquote. In one promotional video, Shadow Dragon says its users can enter, quote, an email, an alias, a name, a phone number, a variety of different things, and immediately have information on your target. We can see interests, we can see who friends are, pictures, videos, unquote. The leaked list of targeted sites and services include ones from major tech companies, such as Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and TikTok. It also includes communication tools like Discord and WhatsApp, activity and hobby-focused sites like AllTrails, Book Crossing, Chess.com, and cigar review site Cigar Dojo, payment services like Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, and PayPal, sex worker sites OnlyFans and Just for Fans, and social networks Blue Sky and Telegram. Even relatively obscure social networks are often included in the lists, such as Be Real. Shadow Dragon also pulls data from some sites geared towards specific demographics and highly personal interests, such as the social network for Black people called Black Planet, or the fetish site FetLife, which 404 Media previously reported. The list also includes Roblox, In a recent video on Shadow Dragon's YouTube channel, staff members discuss how children are groomed on Roblox and other platforms or apps geared towards children. What sort of data is returned when a Shadow Dragon customer queries one of these sites depends on each individual service, and some likely returning much more than others. 404 Media has uploaded the list here, and of course that's a link if you're curious to the list of 200 sites. According to U.S. government procurement databases, Shadow Dragon's clients include the State Department, the Army, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the DEA, and especially ICE. ICE continued its contract with Shadow Dragon as recently as February 24th, with the procurement records saying the deal included access to SocialNet. An ICE statement of work that Epic obtained through the Freedom of Information Act describes why ICE, and specifically Homeland Security Investigations, sought out SocialNet in one instance. And this is a quote from the document, quote, ICE analysts conduct research on readily available public domain open source information that spans beyond U.S. domain websites and require ICE to effectively track and investigate known criminal elements and locations to mitigate the flow of illegal goods and personnel into the United States borders and territories. SocialNet Data is a data subscriptions service that maps social media connections to uncover aliases, associates, and gather inferences of lifestyle and physical location of threats. SocialNet performs federated searches and visualizes social media connections to uncover identities, correlations, networks of associates quickly, unquote. 404 Media contacted numerous companies named in the leaked list of services that Shadow Dragon pulls data from. And then it has several responses from these companies. It talked to Meta, Snap, Cash App, Insta, LinkedIn, and some others. Basically, all of them said the data scraping would seem to violate their terms of service. In the Shadow Dragon podcast, where Clemens made his comments about protesters, he added that protesters are, quote, probably not moving the needle at all. My word of advice for anybody that's feeling invited into the rage mob of the day is, hey man, get off social media. Go buy a lake house, get a beach house, do something. Get in debt and get off social media. Don't get invited into all of this rage, unquote. When 404 Media previously reported these comments, Clemens said in an email that, quote, my comments from the podcast refer to all groups, regardless of affiliation or cause. It was a reminder to everyone that everything we do in public, including social media posts, often lacks a legal expectation of privacy in the same vein as the EFF's recommendations for protesters, unquote. Which is, by the way, a link to a really good article from EFF. And then the last thing it says here is that ICE did not respond to a request for comment. Okay, so regardless of what you think about the whole immigration situation and whether or not ICE is doing the right thing, the whole point of me reading this article is that we have a lot of public information out there about us. All that this tool is doing, apparently, is scraping that data from existing public sources and using that data to not only find out a lot of information about a particular person, but to also figure out who that person is hanging out with and where they're hanging out. And because this is quote-unquote public information, this company is basically saying, hey, it's public. If it's public, then we can scrape this data. And honestly, there's been lawsuits that have backed that up. So these companies can say it's against their terms of service all they want, but if it's really public information that anybody can get to by a web page, companies like this are going to build automated bots that are going to go and scrape all this information and do all this correlation and then sell it to whoever wants to buy it. In this case, government agencies who probably would not have had to get a court order to get this information anyway, but does them the service of doing all the work for them. So just another story about why we really need privacy laws, but also how we need to control and limit and reduce, if possible, the amount of information that we share publicly. Okay, this next one is from Malwarebytes. And it's got a good warning, something that I haven't talked about probably enough. So I saw this article and I thought this would be a good chance to talk about it. The FBI Denver field office has warned of an increasing number of scammy websites offering free online file converter services. Instead of converting files, the tools actually load malware onto victims' computers. The FBI warned specifically about that malware leading to ransomware attacks, but we've also seen similar sites that install browser hijackers, adware, and what they call potentially unwanted programs, or PUPs. Basically, it's crapware. Not really harmful, but very annoying. The cybercriminals offer any kind of popular file conversion to attract victims, with the most common ones being converting .doc to .pdf files and vice versa. There are also sites that offer to combine multiple images into one PDF file. And it's not as if these file converters don't work. Usually they will, and the victim will think nothing more of it. They might even recommend it to a friend or coworker. But in the background, their system has hidden malware in the file that the victim has downloaded, which is capable of gathering information about the affected device, such as personally identifiable information, such as social security numbers, financial information like banking credentials and crypto wallets, other passwords and session tokens that could allow scammers to bypass multi-factor authentication, and email addresses. There are a few possible scenarios the criminals might pursue. 1. They encourage you to download a tool on your device to do the conversion. This is the actual malware. 2. You might be recommended to install a browser extension that you can use going forward. These extensions are often browser hijackers and adware. And 3. In the most sophisticated scenario, the so-called converted file contains malware code that downloads and installs an information stealer, and everyone who opens it will get their device infected. By using one of these online converters, you could be at risk of getting infected with ransomware or enable criminals to steal your data or identity in full. So yeah, this is potentially a thing. I would certainly be wary of any online file conversion site that asks you to download software to do this conversion. And honestly, we have to worry about any website now that informs us, hey, to do what you got to do, you've got to install some software first. Now, obviously, there are apps and software that we do want to install, but we should go to the App Store to get those. When we weren't expecting to have to install something like a browser extension or download a software tool, that's when we should be getting suspicious. By the way, there are a lot of tools that you probably already have, applications that are built into your computer that can do some of the conversions that you're looking to do. So do a little web searching to see if you can find something that you already have that might be able to do what you're trying to do. For example, the Preview app on Mac OS is a real Swiss Army knife for this kind of stuff. All right, I said I had 2 stories from 404 Media. This is the last one, and it's a little update on Clearview AI, the company that has been collecting all sorts of images of people and selling products to supposedly only the good guys that let them identify somebody just by taking a picture of their face. And it turns out they were looking for pictures in some really creepy places. So this is short, let me just read it. Controversial facial recognition company Clearview AI attempted to purchase hundreds of millions of arrest records, including social security numbers, mugshots, and even email addresses to incorporate into its product, 404 Media has learned. For years, Clearview AI has collected billions of photos from social media sites, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and others, and sold access to its facial recognition tool to law enforcement. The collection and sale of user-generated photos by a private surveillance company to police, without that person's knowledge or consent, sparked international outcry when it was first revealed in the New York Times in 2020. And that was Kashmir Hill, and that's what we talked to her about when she came on the show, after she released her book, Your Face Belongs to Us. New documents obtained by 404 Media reveal that Clearview AI spent nearly $1 million in a bid to purchase 690 million arrest records and 390 million arrest photos from all 50 states from an intelligence firm. The contract further describes the records as including current and former home addresses, dates of birth, arrest photos, social security and cell phone numbers, and email addresses. Clearview attempted to purchase this data from Investigative Consultant Incorporated, or ICI, which billed itself as an intelligence company with access to tens of thousands of databases and the ability to create unique data streams for its clients. The contract was signed in mid-2019 at a time when Clearview AI was quietly collecting billions of photos off the internet and was relatively unknown at the time. Ultimately, the entire deal fell apart after Clearview AI and ICI clashed over the utility of the data, with each company filing breach of contract claims. Clearview currently advertises to customers that its technology, quote, includes the largest known database of 50-plus billion facial images sourced from public-only web sources, including news media, mugshot websites, public social media, and many other sources, unquote. And Clearview has previously told customers that it was, quote, working to acquire all U.S. mugshots nationally from the last 15 years, unquote. Purchasing booking photos for a facial recognition system raises serious privacy risks, according to Jeremy Scott, senior counsel and director of Epic's Project on Surveillance Oversight, which he was quoted in a previous article we talked about today. He points to both the algorithmic biases built into facial recognition systems and the potential for human bias by the police who would review the images. Numerous innocent people have been arrested based on facial recognition technology that misidentified them. This has happened almost exclusively to black people, in part because the technology is less accurate on black and brown faces. Ultimately, Clearview AI is facing an uncertain future after a barrage of lawsuits against the company and fines from regulators across the globe. So I need to look in to see where things are at now with Clearview AI. As far as I know, there's still an ongoing concern, though they have run into a lot of legal trouble, so I'm not sure what their current status is. I do know that the original founder and CEO, Wonton Tat, has resigned, and they've replaced them with a couple of the guys who are some original investors. But I think they're still in the middle of all these legal battles, and as far as I know, they're still selling stuff to law enforcement. All right, one more story, and then we'll get to the tip of the week. I'm really starting to lose my voice. I've had some really nasty allergy stuff going on lately, and man, it's just killing me. So I apologize for my voice getting a little bit hoarse, but let me see if I can't wrap this up here, and then we'll get to the tip of the week, and we'll let you go. So this last one is a bit of positive news, and it's from Apple Insider. After years of bizarre pressure over how Messages has blue bubbles for iOS users and green for Android ones, and maybe a nudge from China, Apple finally added support for RCS messaging with iOS 18. Its implementation, though, did not support Google's implementation of end-to-end encryption. Now, as spotted by 9to5Mac, the RCS standards body GSM Association, GSMA, and Apple have announced new end-to-end encryption support for iOS. And this is a quote from an Apple statement, quote, "End-to-end encryption is a powerful privacy and security technology that iMessage has supported since the beginning, and now we are pleased to have helped lead a cross-industry effort to bring end-to-end encryption to RCS Universal Profile published by the GSMA. We will add support for end-to-end encrypted RCS messages to iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and watchOS in future software updates," unquote. Apple RCS support has followed the GSMA standard, and this announcement comes as the authority releases a new specification called RCS Universal Profile 3.0. Designed in collaboration with Apple, this new profile includes end-to-end encryption as part of the standard, instead of being an extra layer added by Google. And this is a quote from Tom Van Pelt from GSMA, quote, "The new specifications define how to apply MLS, or message layer security, within the context of RCS. These procedures ensure that messages and other content, such as files, remain confidential and secure as they travel between clients. That means that RCS will be the first large-scale messaging service to support interoperable end-to-end encryption between client implementations from different providers," unquote. Apple's announcement was simultaneous with the GSMA's announcement about the release of RCS Universal Profile 3. It's not clear how long it will take any firm to implement the new standard, and Apple has not committed to when it will support it in iOS. RCS support on iOS means that messages between iPhone and Android users can contain images and other rich media rather than solely text. Google has tried to portray it as superior to Messages, but to date, different firms have added different end-to-end encryption extensions, and carriers are slow to adopt it. Anyway, the bottom line here is that RCS, which is the technological successor to plain old regular text messaging or SMS, and RCS includes things like, better support for emojis and files and images and comments on messages, like, where you put a thumbs up on a message, that kind of thing. RCS supports a lot of these more modern features of things, and it'd be really nice for Android phones and iPhones to be able to play much more nicely together. That's already happening. But now, on top of all that, the icing on the cake is we will now have end-to-end encryption as well. That'll be fantastic. And since Apple's behind it, we know they're going to do it. It's just a matter of when. And at that point, this is still not clear. One thing I can guarantee you, though, is that Apple is going to maintain the whole blue bubble, green bubble thing. That has become quite the marketing thing for Apple. And there's been all sorts of interesting chatter about them sticking to their guns on that to make sure that everybody knows on an Apple device when you're not talking to somebody else on an Apple device. Okay, and now it's time for the tip of the week. And it's that time of year again. It's tax time, which means it's also tax scam time. And so I've talked about this every year. I've got several articles on this. I'm really going to, because especially since my voice is going and my throat's actually hurting at this point. So I'm going to wrap this up quickly. I'm going to send you to firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com for the full article on this. But at the high level here, here's the main thing. Beware of any text messages or phone messages you get supposedly from the IRS that say, hey, you've got a problem with your return. You need to send us money right away, or bad things are going to happen. We're going to fine you even more money, or we're going to send, police to your door to arrest you. That never happens. That is not how the IRS operates. In almost all cases with the IRS in the United States, you will get something in the mail if it's something official. You could also check your status online, which I'll get to here in a minute. The IRS actually has a really good website about current tax scams. There's a link to the article about this that talks about the different types of scams that it is seeing currently or has seen in the past, and how to recognize them. That's a great, if you're concerned about anything going on with the IRS or any of the kind of scenarios we're talking about here. If you really want to find out if this is going on, I would first check that site and see if something sounds familiar. So if you do get a text message that purports to be from the IRS that says, here, you must click this link within a certain amount of time, the urgency is always a part of these scams, just delete it. Definitely do not click on the link. Same thing for email messages. If you get a phone call from somebody claiming to be from the IRS with some sort of a scary message, just hang up. If it really is a problem with your account, you can call the IRS back yourself at the official IRS number, or again, you can go to your online account. So let me take the time now to talk about planting your flag. If you are a U.S. citizen and have ever made money ever, you have an IRS account, whether or not you use it or not. So you should use it. You should claim it for yourself before a bad guy tries to do it instead of you. If they know enough about you, they may be able to basically claim your online account for themselves, and then, of course, get up to all sorts of mischief. So go to irs.gov. Unfortunately, you will have to now set up an account with id.me to set up your IRS account, which involves sending them information. I do not like this setup at all. I've tried to work around it. I tried to find some other way, and currently there just isn't one. So go to the IRS, go through the rigmarole to set up your account. Make sure you set up your IRS account. And one more thing you should do is you should set up your IRS IP PIN. And in this case, IP stands for identity protection. It's kind of like a two-factor authentication thing. Basically, once you sign up for your IP PIN, you will be issued a 6-digit code every year. Automatically, this will happen every year. And you must give that PIN to file your taxes. And so if you have somebody who files your taxes for you, you're going to have to get them this PIN number so they can file on your behalf. Now, the one other thing I want to mention as part of this is a common scenario where you might need to send some, let's say, tax documents, receipts, past tax returns to a tax preparer. And you may need to do that digitally. And if you're going to do that, you need to do it securely. Your tax files contain a lot of very personal information and basically everything somebody would need to perform identity theft. So I have a whole article on how to send files securely. The main thing is you want to encrypt the files themselves before you send it, but also, if possible, you should send those files using an encrypted transmitting mechanism. So that's a whole article unto itself. I just updated it and made sure it was up to date. There's a link to that in this article as well. So again, go to firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. It's probably the top article there, depending on when you listen to this podcast. But just search on tax scams and look on the most recent article, and you'll find all this information there, including links to several other good articles that you might want to read and other websites with supporting information. So there's the news of the week, and along with my little tip of the week, a PSA about tax scams. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this week. My voice is shot. I need to stop talking. So I'll make this quick. For my top patrons, the Merlin's Musings for this week, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about online age verification, some ideas I've got about how we might be able to do that in a more private way. And then next week, we'll get back to our interviews. We'll be talking with Lisa Lavasser from the Internet Safety Lab about how we are tracked online and what she is doing to try to bring a lot more transparency to that. It's a really cool project. I also just got done interviewing Bruce and Heidi Potter, who are the founders of the ShmooCon Hacker Conference. That was a lot of fun. They're really cool people, and they've got some great stories. That probably won't air for a while, but rest assured that is in the pipeline along with several other great interviews. So subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and then you won't miss any of that. That'll do it for this week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there, and until next time, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.